I became
this sober vet.
Don't live, don't live, don't live.
Our mission is to normalize sobriety with veterans who are using and abusing substances in a harmful, self-medicating way. All right, welcome everybody. I am Joe York. This is This Sober Vet, episode 1 Deuce, and I am joined by the person that coined the phrase, I pity the fool. Actually, hold up. Nope. That was Mr. T. I'm joined by Dr. T. I got my T's twisted. Sorry.
You just mixed it up just a little bit,
Just
slightly
a little
there.
off, slightly, yes. So welcome, Dr. T. How you doing?
I'm doing well today. Thank you so much for the cool introduction. How about yourself, Joe?
I'm doing good. It's always a pleasure. I'm so blessed to be here, and I'm super excited about today's episode.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm actually going to flex for our guest today. His name is JT Morocco. He is a Army active duty Green Beret, so total badass.
Okay.
He did
yes.
6 tours defending our awesome country. And he is the founder of The Mindful Warrior, which I can't wait to hear more about. So I would like to introduce our friend JT. Welcome, JT.
Hey, Joe, Dr. T. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate y'all.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. This is huge. I'm very excited to hear your story because just these 3 points are so badass. Like I can't wait to see what's coming up next. So if you don't mind starting from the beginning, why'd you join the Army? When did you join? And just kind of tell that story.
I think the decision to join the Army actually started when I was 13. I grew up in, I guess we'll say, a financially unstable house, single mom, trying to make it with 3 kids. And so initially I saw the Army as a way to kind of get out of the situation that I was in. And that changed over time. I grew up in New York, just north of New York City. My mother worked in the city. My first jobs were in New York City. And when I was in high school was when 9/11 hit. And that hit home in a lot of ways, both because my mom was working in the city that day. And so it kind of shifted to, wanting to serve my country and give back. And, a kind of a sense of wanting to serve and be a leader within the Army was one of the main motivators there early on. So eventually I only applied to one college because it was the only one that I knew offered a full ride, or at least that I knew how to get a full ride, and that was West Point. I completely botched the application and had to scramble. So I ended up going to Marion Military Institute my first year of college, and then I sorted the nominations that you need from a senator or a congressman, and eventually made my way to West Point, which is where I met my wife. She was not going to West Point, but she was in boarding school at the time.
Okay.
And from there, commissioned in 2009. And initially it was as a 12 Alpha combat engineer, and stationed at Fort Hood.
That's my neck of the woods.
There you go.
Temple, Texas.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Well, that's exciting. So then what happened next? Where were you first stationed? When did you first go overseas?
So got to Fort Hood in 2010. I think we deployed in, was it 2011? So that was the first deployment was to Iraq. It was supposed to be a 6-month trip, and then we ended up redeploying immediately and going to Kuwait and Camp Buren for the next 6 months. At that point, I had already done PL time, company XO time, and decided I wanted another challenge. And I had already had the opportunity to go to sapper school prior to the deployment. So I was kind of already hungry for the next challenge out there. And I was considering getting out at 5 years. That was the original plan, just do five and fly, as we called it. But after that first deployment, I really kind of felt like I found a place there I could thrive, and I wanted to continue to challenge myself. So I decided to look into special operations. Initially, I actually was looking at civil affairs, and then I was like, well, let me try for special forces and see if that works out.
Okay.
So I did that in 2012 after getting back from the deployment. I ended up getting selected, and from there it was 2 years in North Carolina going through the Q course. Had my first child, Eden, who's now 10, and then we got stationed at Fort Campbell with
Okay.
5th Special Forces Group, and I was there for about 5 years. Did 4 trips with 5th Group.
Goodness. How long were those deployments?
They varied in length. On the shorter side, I think the shortest one we had was 3 months,
Okay.
but it was probably one of the more intense ones.
Uh-huh.
And then most of them were around 6 months, but 3 to 6 months are typical. But 6 month is what we always planned around, and those were mostly to Syria, working the ISIS problem set, as we were kind of the lead on
Right.
that effort, at least from the special forces side.
Well, thank you for all that. That's a lot. That is definitely a lot that you've done, and we appreciate that. And welcome home. And I know you're still serving, but yes, thank you, man. That's you're doing big
Yes.
things. So if you don't mind getting into your drug of choice and how that kind of started.
Yeah. It was really a slow progression. Right around the time I had decided I wanted to eventually go into the Army at 13 was when I first found alcohol. It was a way to just feel normal, a way for me to connect, socialize with some of my peers. I had, some challenges, I'll say, in early childhood, as far as sexual abuse and different,
Mhm.
difficult divorce situation with my parents. A lot of contention there that drug on for years in the courts. So initially, it was just my way to kind of relax and feel normal and kind of
Mhm.
forget about all that. But it started off as a good outlet, a positive outlet, a way to connect to some of my peers and find common ground and build some friendships. Even in college, it was we definitely went a little extreme at times, and binge drinking and whatnot. I think
Right.
that's part of the common
Mhm.
college experience.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Um, and but over time, especially as my trips with the Army kind of set in, then it slowly over time kind of changed shape and form.
Mhm.
After my first trips, I started to have it, and didn't realize it until years later. Some of the early signs of PTSD. I started
Mhm.
having insomnia, sleeping problems, that would plague me for the next 13 years. And I
Okay.
just managed and coped with them as best I could at the time.
How did you cope with them, JT?
Um, Mostly by just focusing on other things. It was very much
Mhm.
a avoidance. I didn't really seek therapy
Yeah.
until 2020, and I started looking at other treatment modalities out there.
Okay.
Um, but really, throughout the years, it was all right. Let me just focus on these short-term goals and just kind of compartmentalize and suppress, because
Mhm.
that seemed to work in childhood, and it continued to serve me pretty well, even throughout some of the tougher deployments later on.
Suck it up, drive on, right?
Pretty much, yeah. As time went on and things didn't get better, I think it was in between my second, I guess it would be my fourth trip, um, and my fifth trip is when I first kind of had my first red flag, where I noticed my drinking was, it would mostly be maybe on the weekends. I was pretty good about not drinking a lot on the weekdays, or if I did, it would just be a couple beers or a dinner with the wife or something like that.
Mhm.
But I noticed that on the weekends, the consumption rate would go through the roof.
Hmm.
Fridays and Saturdays, it was gloves off. Like, I earned this. Like, I busted my butt.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Now's my time to relax. Now's my time to just chill out.
Right.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it got to objectively unhealthy levels, and I had a couple blackouts. And after one night, this was about 9 years ago, I didn't remember much of what happened the night before. And as my wife was telling me, what had happened the night before, um, it wasn't necessarily anything bad. Like we didn't get in a fight or anything. It was actually quite the opposite. It was, moments of intimacy that I just completely forgot
Oh,
and it
wow.
didn't even register.
That's a damn shame.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Man, I'm missing out on the best parts of life." And for me, that was kinda my first kinda wake up where it's like, "Hey, this is not the way to be living your life, brother."
Yeah.
And so I knew at the time my wife had, she had made comments, about being worried about the rate I was drinking, or initially it was Coors Light or light beers for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, but I'd go through like 12 in a day, and I was just like, well, it's like water. It's like
Mhm.
4%, and it's like you barely even notice it.
Yep.
Um, and I would just come up with all kinds of justifications why it was fine. It was normal. It wasn't really that bad.
Mhm.
But she had made comments, and so then I just didn't want to hear the comments, and I didn't want to worry her, so I just started hiding it. Um,
Yep.
but then when it
Mhm.
crossed that line of, all right, now we're mixing beer and then maybe, some vodka or tequila or some other hard liquor, and I'm doing it in secret. And then, it was that morning after I didn't really have a memory of the entire night before,
Mhm.
that I confessed to her. I'm like, hey, I have a problem and I need to do something about it. And I need your support. I don't know what that looks like, but I know I need to change something because this is like clearly not sustainable. At the time uh, we had had a lot of losses in our unit, both from the past trips as well as guys committing suicide. In some cases,
Yeah.
substances or alcohol were involved.
Right.
Yeah.
And we had a close call, not a couple months prior to that day.
Mhm.
Um, so it was fresh on everyone's mind. It was fresh on the spouse's mind. And so when I told her this, and she knew, like, especially the previous trip was a pretty tough one, and she knew it was bugging me a little bit, but um, to her it was like five-alarm fire, and she's thinking worst case scenario, so she's getting anxious and stressed. And to be
Mhm.
fair, like, I mean, I was gone 2/3 of every year we were there.
Right.
So there she is at this point. We have two young kids at home, and she's by herself, doesn't have the greatest support network, and so she's already pretty stressed out. And now add this on top of it,
Right. Yeah, it's tough.
and so she, freaked out a little bit about it. And, I quickly turned from me wanting to help myself to me, all right, let me do this for her. Let me do this
Mhm.
to appease her, to give her some peace of mind. And I knew, like, I never had issues with getting sober for other people. Like on deployments, like I no issues, like just going completely dry and staying sober throughout a deployment. In fact, I relied on them because usually my like peak performance would be during deployments, and then I'd come back and then it would start to go downhill, and I'd be like, man, I need another trip so I can take care of myself better,
Right.
which is insane
Yeah.
that I have to go into a combat environment to take better care of myself.
Right.
But there it's, you have the mission, you have a purpose, you have other people that are depending on you. And to me, it wasn't even a choice. It was like, I need to do this. I need to be sober, because I can't let these guys down. I gotta be, performing my A game, because lives are on the line. And if I'm not functioning the way I need to, like, it can have very real life consequences. So initially I started going to AA.
How was AA for you?
The initial groups that I got introduced to, I'll be honest, it didn't really resonate with me at the time.
Mhm.
I really struggled with, yeah, I think it was just the approaches of some of those particular groups that I went to. At the time, I was, pretty, devout atheist. I had no spirituality in my life whatsoever.
Okay.
And they were very much pushing the God and higher power.
Higher power, yeah.
Yeah, which
Mhm.
which I really struggled with. And so at the time, I was trying to take the lessons that I could, but it just wasn't hitting. It wasn't really resonating. And now to this day, like, I go to AA meetings like every week. It's just about finding that right group, the right approach, and the people
Mhm.
that you're more comfortable with. But early on, I was a little turned off by it, but I went to it out of just desperation because I didn't know what else to do at the time.
Yeah.
And I saw it as like, well, here's an action step that I can take. Here's something that I can do to demonstrate that I'm trying and that I'm not drinking. And so I white knuckled it, and was sober there for a little while. And then the next appointment came, and I was like, okay, I'm good. Like, good reset. Like,
Right.
you know,
Mhm.
um, and then after that trip, it was right back to the same old behavior.
Mhm.
Even at the end of the trip, I'd be like, I don't even know why I drink. I feel great. Like, why would I want to like go back to feeling or operating at a lower level?
Hmm.
Yeah.
But then without fail, it'd be like 48 hours back in the States. And I'm like, all right, where's that beer? Like, where's that drink?
Mhm.
And so that cycle kind of repeated itself where, in between trips would start to kind of decline downward. And then, next trip would get sober and kind of get a little healthier.
Now, what's your wife doing at this point? Is she still in your ear about you quitting? Is she kind of letting you do your thing, or?
I mean, she knew that some of the trips were weighing on me and pretty tough, especially the last one where we lost a close friend um, in Manbij, Syria, during a suicide attack, and so
Sorry.
Yeah.
she gave a little bit of grace, to me at the
Mhm.
time, but I knew she was concerned, and to not have her worry. I just got better at hiding it, to be perfectly honest. I got really good at knowing like, all right, here's my limits. Here's when I, will allow myself to drink. I never drank at work, never drank during the day. It was quite the opposite. You know, it was one analogy I use is I was like the Energizer bunny where from the moment I woke up, I would have tasks to do, where it's like, all right, wake up, whether I'm doing training or a lot of days, it's let's get the kids ready for school, let's get the day going. So it's like dad tasks, and it's all right, let me do some chores to help out Kristen, just task, and then go to work, and then it's work tasks all day long and then come home and walk in the door and it's immediately like, all right, let me jump into dad role, let me jump into husband role. And I would just
Mhm.
saturate my like every second of my day with just different tasks to do, which was a great avoidance strategy in retrospect.
Mm.
It just occupied my brain, gave me something to do with my hands. But around, after the kids went to bed and things kind of slowed down around like 7:30, 8:30 at night, I would run out of tasks to do.
You're left with your thoughts, right?
Yeah, and then I find my either Kristen's taking time for herself, watching a show, getting ready for bed, or I'm doing the dishes by myself or something else. But I'm with myself, and that's where I started to struggle. Because as soon as I didn't have anything left to do, and I was just left with myself, my thoughts, that's where things would start to ruminate and churn. And then I would tell myself, well,
Yeah.
I just busted my ass all day.
Right.
Like I earned this beer.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
I worked for it. And like, hey, everybody's doing good. I'm doing all the things that, a good husband, a good father should be doing. Like I'm checking all the boxes. So like,
Hmm.
why
Mhm.
not? Why not have a couple drinks?
Yeah.
And it over time it kind of progressed and got worse. Um, I had after fifth group, I moved back to North Carolina, did a master's program, and it was right during like as COVID was kicking off, which was great because it got a lot of good quality family time. Not great
Mhm.
because I was also able to drink a lot, at the house.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it was finding that balance of all the responsibilities, but then also taking care of myself. But I did take some action to try to address some of the other issues that were becoming more problematic, right? Because in my
Okay.
mind, like drinking was never really the problem. Drinking was my solution.
Right.
Mhm.
My
Hmm.
problem was me.
Mhm.
My problem was the how I viewed the experiences that I had in the past, whether all the way back to childhood, even. Um, but experiences, especially in combat, and then eventually getting diagnosed with like PTSD, anxiety, depression, insomnia, like those were real things that I
Mhm.
could point to and be like, that's the real problem.
Right.
But that's only a part of it, right? Once I moved over to Third Special Forces Group, I took command of a Special Forces company, and I had never anticipated, like I had said originally, I was planning on 5 years and out, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to finish my detachment commander time, my team time, and then I'm going to get out. And as I kind of socialized that when I was still at fifth group, I had some senior NCOs and warrant officers, one of whom was Chief John Farmer, who pulled me aside and they would talk to me, like, look, man, like you've been through it, you've seen good leadership, you've seen bad leadership, like really need you to stay, like at least stay through company command, just give the guys like one good trip, where they can have somebody who knows what they're doing, is dependable, and has kind of seen both sides of this.
Right.
Um, and so I made the promise to guys like John and a couple other senior NCOs that, all right, I'll stick around. I'm going to do company command time, and then I'm done, and then I'm hanging it up. And John was one of the guys we ended up losing in January 2019.
Sorry, brother.
That
Mm.
one hit home, right? Like that one hurt. But at that point, I was like, well, now I have to do this for John. I have to
Mm.
continue to,
Mhm.
um, be there. And it became less about serving for myself or what I could accomplish or the deployments. And all it became, the whole focus was just like, I'm going to keep doing this to try to bring everybody else home, to try to not, lose another guy. And it became about just serving the amazing people that I had the opportunity to work with, is what kept me in. Even to this day, it's what keeps me in. Because I checked all the professional boxes and goals that I wanted to check long ago, but it's the people that keep me coming back, and motivate me each day to keep working.
Living life on purpose.
To that point, like purpose was right. All right, let me I'll take command of a company if they give it to me, and they did. And then we'll train up the guys, and we competed. There's three different SF companies in a battalion, and so we were all competing for the one company that would get a deployment mission. And so my company ended up performing well, and we got selected to go on this next trip. And and I got asked to stay another year, so I was going to do 2 years in command. So I'm like, oh, this is great. I'll do the trip, and then I'm done. I fulfilled my promise to John, um, and I can we can move on to the next thing, next phase of life. And it was about 3 weeks out from what would have been my seventh deployment, and I woke up one morning after drinking, um, and I lost vision in one eye. I could barely see out of my left eye.
Oh, wow.
It
Mm.
was, I thought it maybe we'll just, got like some goo in my eye or whatever, slept funny. It will just like go away and we'll clear up and it'll be fine. But it didn't. It got worse. And then so I go see the doctors, and I saw probably like 6 or 7 different specialists, and they couldn't, diagnose it. They weren't sure how to treat it. And so after a while, now my command's like, hey man, like if this is something serious, like we might have to pull you from the trip and, replace you with somebody else. So I'm scrambling to try to get this issue sorted out, and just have a plan, whatever it is, somebody give me a treatment protocol so I can be good and deploy. And finally, I take all my paperwork, go up to Duke University, find one doctor up there, and he gave me a treatment plan. But it was just a couple days too late, and they're like, "Hey, sorry to do this to you, man. Like, we're gonna have to pull you from this deployment.
Wow.
Mm.
But don't worry, we're gonna give you battalion XO spot, which sure maybe for career development progression is something, but like that's not why I'm there. I'm there to lead troops in combat. I'm there to support the guys and provide that leadership that I wish I had had, in some cases. And so it was just a punch to the gut,
Hmm.
not being able to go with the guys.
Yeah.
So I really struggled with that one.
Yeah.
But now I have this other issue. I have, responsibilities being essentially the battalion XO and then the leadership board. So the majority of the battalion's back in the rear, and they're still training. They're still having to deploy on other missions. And so now I'm the person who's filling that leadership gap while trying to recover from this what ended up being uveitis, but it was just presented very weird. So they put me on a super high dose of prednisone, which just made all of my PTSD symptoms just like go through the roof. Sleep
Mm.
got worse. I could only sleep 2, 3 hours a night. My cognitive function just went way down. And so I was really struggling. But thankfully, prior to leaving the company, I had a lot of detachment leadership that would come to me, and we would talk about just like office cooler talk where hey, what are you struggling with? Oh yeah, you got sleep problems. I do too. And so we started to normalize like talking about whether it be PTSD or insomnia or different issues and challenges guys are facing. And so as I kind of saw that, like, hey, this just isn't me,
Right.
and there's actually a lot of other people out here in the community that are struggling with the same things. And while it's great we're talking about it, when I have guys come into my office and like really be struggling, like I had a limited number of resources I could point them to. There were the ones that the Army offered, whether it's SUDC or behavioral health or, different programs, or, hey, if you got a specific need, then perhaps I can go and advocate for it or get a benevolent organization to help you out. But I was like, man, this is not enough. So I started trying to research and find what other resources were out there, just understand the ones that were. And so I started talking to providers, started
Mhm.
talking to other doctors. USAC has a care coalition that ties into all the benevolent networks. So started talking to some of those folks as well. And in the process of doing that, as I'm talking to, I think it was one clinician, and he was, a combat vet as well. And so I was like explaining to him, I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm seeing in the companies. And, like we all are experiencing these things. And as I'm relaying some of my own experiences to just kind of communicate, some of the struggles that I'm seeing from the leadership level, he kind of called me out and he was like, hey, you should probably be, talking to somebody about this stuff too. And it kind of, that was, one of the first, light bulbs that went off where I was like, well, if I'm going to lead by example and normalize this even further, then like, yeah, I guess my ass should be doing it too.
Yeah.
So I started to get treatment for the PTSD and insomnia back in 2020,
Okay.
which I'm glad I did because, then as we, move into the XO spot, and then eventually I move into another command position at third group, um, all my symptoms are getting worse, even despite going to treatment. And some of it's like you're opening up Pandora's box where
Exactly.
a lot of
Yeah.
these things,
Right.
I was really good at compartmentalizing and suppressing and avoiding them for years. And now all of a sudden they're coming to the surface.
Yeah, it's tough. Yep.
Mhm.
One of the analogies I've heard is it's like an iceberg, right? Like if you're
Yes.
constantly deploying and your op
Yeah.
tempo is super high, you don't
Mhm.
necessarily have time to analyze all the problems, and you're only seeing the ones that are maybe, just at the surface. And maybe that looks like drinking, maybe that looks like some, trouble sleeping. But as I found, at least in my case, and then talking to a lot of other vets and guys in the community, is once they have time away from deployment or they start to unpack some of these things, then the water starts to recede. And then that iceberg and then the full breadth of what they're dealing with starts to come into focus. And that was definitely the case with me, where as I started to have that time and space away from the constant deployments, all of a sudden this stuff started coming back unexpectedly in ways that I just didn't anticipate and weren't impacting me previously. I never had anxiety attacks in my life, and then all of a sudden I'm having anxiety attacks.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And so at the time, especially after, I was already in a objectively depressed state, being pulled from the company command position, and I'm sucking as I'm get on this high dose of prednisone. And so my coping strategy was alcohol,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so that's where I really started to take a turn, and I started to drink more frequently as a way to just kind of cope with all the other issues. Um,
Mhm.
and it wasn't so much that the job itself was that stressful. It was just everything layered on top that I just hadn't adequately processed or done the work on. And so I could see the decline. And then by the time I got to my next command position for another company, um, I started noticing things that were really bothering me, like
Okay.
things that, previously, I would have never dropped the ball on little stuff like recognizing people when they do a good job, on simple things like, "Hey, let's make sure we get an RCOM for this guy," or "They did great work," or awards being on time, or evaluations being done on time, like things that I was on top of historically, never had an issue with. Now all of a sudden, I'm dropping the ball on them. I'm forgetting to do those little things,
Mhm.
and now I'm having an issue with that because I'm I'm mad at myself. I'm like, I'm not doing what I expect of other leaders. And what does that mean about me? And so then I started to struggle with that more, as far as not being able to perform at the level that I was used to or I expected other people to.
Right.
And my sleep was getting worse. My drinking was started to progress, and now it wasn't just on the weekends. Now it might be on a couple weeknights, you know. And some weeks it would be the whole week, and I'd be sober at work, but then as soon as that 8:30 p.m. hit, then it was, hey, you earned this, like, have at it. Um i i recognized that I had an issue, and I was actively trying to cut back on the drinking. Um but I had to really hit like my bottom, and that
Mhm.
came um once I moved over to what we call the SWIC, which is our training school, um, where we train all the new Green Berets that are coming into the force. And I showed up there thinking I was going to take command of one unit, um, and ended up, they're like, "Hey, you're already now a more senior major. Like, we need you to go into this staff job," which is the last job that I wanted to do. And I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't sign up to do staff jobs. I wanted to either be
Right.
in command positions or like be working with the guys on the field.
Now, real quick, do you think they made that decision because they saw the effects of alcohol, or they kind of judged it on your performance, or what do you think that was based on?
No, I think it was just it's just coincidence. Like, I knew going over to SWIC, there was a chance that they were going to shuffle things around and need to kind of move people into different positions, especially for as younger guys are coming into the organization. I say younger guys, I mean other majors that haven't been in those key developmental billets that need that time to kind of for their own career progression. So at that point, I'm kind of like free chicken, right? So it's like, typically, if you're focused on career progression, then you'll like want to work at a group level staff or something like that, and kind of continue to get in those positions of different levels of responsibility. But I was quite deliberately just trying to plateau my own career and just keep doing the jobs that I enjoy doing,
Right.
Yeah.
um, recognizing that, hey, I have some issues that I still need to work on. And at the end of my time at third group, which would have been the time that I would have put in my retirement paperwork and hung it up, I decided, well, let me focus on healing. Let me focus on trying to like deal with some of these issues that are clearly impacting me. Um, and then I'll hang it up. And I mean, I wasn't 2 weeks onto the job when I just absolutely shredded my knee.
Mm.
And then I had to get an emergency surgery, put on painkillers for a while.
Oh, geez.
And
Ah.
I already had like chronic pain kind of creeping up, but talking to all the old crusty NCOs is like, that just comes with the job. Like, after a while,
Yeah.
like, your body
Yeah.
starts breaking down, you start
You're right.
feeling arthritis and pain. So in my
Uh-huh.
mind, it was just, all right, I guess this is, at the initially they started to come in around like 34, 35. I'm like, all right, I guess this is just what it is. Heard
Hmm.
guys
Mhm.
talking about this, like,
It's just some Motrin.
exactly right. Or just have a drink and you'll be fine. Was the rationale at the time.
JDog is your local veteran owned and operated junk removal company. We do everything from a single item pickup to a full estate cleanout. We also do small demo, sheds, playgrounds, jacuzzis. Our pricing is based on volume. Estimates are always free. We also do our best to keep items out of the landfill. We have a warehouse in Willow Street where we take repurposed items. There we are able to donate to veterans in need, and the last Saturday of the month, we open it up to the public garage sale style so everyone can enjoy these items. Put some local veterans to work. Call JDog today. 844-GET-JDOG or 484-467-1424.
So it was during that time, after that injury, that my normal pain level might have been at a 2 or a 3 on any given day out of 10. But post that injury, it stayed at like 8 or a 9, like
Oh,
every
Mm,
day.
jeez. Ouch.
yeah.
And surgery helped, but it was still pretty brutal. And at the time, my only solution once I ran out of painkillers was alcohol. So that way I could at least get some relief. At the time I convinced myself I could go to sleep that way. But I mean, my insomnia issues at the time were so bad that the only way I could get to sleep was either alcohol or trazodone or combining the two. And that's really where, started to reach the bottom. I was on medical leave, recovery, post surgery. Um, pain was bad, and my coping mechanism was alcohol. Because I didn't have anything else to do during the day, and the kids are at school. Well, now it's getting into a really bad pattern, and that was the time period where it switched from a bad coping mechanism to a full blown addiction, because I didn't want to worry, my wife. So I'm just really good about hiding it now, but not too great, because she would still find bottles hidden around, or see the cans in the trash, and it finally got to the point where I started to black out again and not remembering periods of time from the night before. And finally one morning, after my wife found me in the house passed out, um, we kind of had our come to Jesus moment, where she didn't know what to do. She was scared. She was worried about, if this behavior continued, the impacts that it might have on the kids, if it gets much worse. Because I mean, I was never, like drunk or anything in front of the kids, but it was after they went to bed. But she was worried about, well, what happens if they find you in the morning, or what happens if this starts to slip into the daytime. um, and there was also impacts and strain on our relationship, because she was stressed, I was stressed. We're getting into more fights because I'm drinking,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and I'm not clear headed, and I'm not, the best version of myself. Um, and it finally got to the point where she gave me an ultimatum. She's like, you either need to figure this out, or you need to get out of the house. And that was my wake up call,
Right.
because
Hmm.
in my mind, it was everything that I worked for, you know, in the army, like career wise, all the goals I had, like those were falling apart, because I was not performing the way that I expected myself to perform professionally. I wasn't being the husband that I expected myself to be. And if I wasn't with my family, then, I'm not with my kids, and I'm not being the father that I wanted to be. So I just saw everything crumbling down, and the potential for the first time to really lose it all.
Mhm.
Um, and so then it became, well, I need to do everything I can to get myself right. I need to address, PTSD. I need to address the insomnia. I need to address the alcohol use, because that's getting out of hand objectively. So at that point, I decided I will do whatever it takes to get myself sober and address these issues. And I meant it. And I made her a promise. I'm like, I'm done drinking. I'm not going to drink again. And I was serious when I made that promise. I started going to AA. I started exploring other treatment modalities and really doubling down on it.
Mhm.
But I made it about 2, 3 weeks of white knuckling it after I made that promise. And, I talked to a lot of other guys. I get anywhere from 5 to 10 calls a week from like vets and other guys in active duty that are struggling with some of these same issues. And it
Mhm.
was almost like there was another person, behind the steering wheel that wasn't me at times.
Mhm.
Like I could leave work and be like, I'm not drinking today. And then in the time it would take me to walk to, my car, and there was a little shopette, in the parking lot next to where my car was. And then it was like I would black out. Like I remember walking, and I remember walking into the place after I had told myself I'm not drinking today.
Mhm.
And then it
Mhm.
was like I would suddenly come to, and I'm literally driving again, and then I look over and there's a bottle of tequila in the passenger
Oof.
seat,
Yeah, that's
and
rough.
I'm
Wow.
just like, what the hell is going on? And and that's where I realized that I didn't have control, and that's what fucking scared me. That's what really woke me up,
That's a
because
scary moment. Yeah.
control is my value proposition. Like that is my, as a combat leader, being in control and being able to control your environment regardless of what's going on, keep a clear mind and be disciplined throughout it. Like that's my value.
Yeah, but not remembering shit is like,
Yeah.
"Whoa," right?
Now, if I can't even have the self-discipline to, you know, not drink when I decide not to drink, like that scared me. Because I'm like, I'm losing myself. And so now I'm fighting two different fights. I'm fighting the fight with my mental health from anxiety, depression, PTSD symptoms, insomnia. And now I have this bigger fight all of a sudden with alcohol. And there was a couple key kind of moments that really kind of opened me up to the different ways forward. I mean, at first it started was like, I need to make a change because I'm looking in the mirror and I don't recognize the person that's staring back at me anymore. Like I see a shell of a man, I see a shell of the warrior that I once knew.
Hmm.
Uh,
Mm.
not, not as physically in shape as I used to be, eating like crap, sleeping like crap, and consuming way too much alcohol.
Mhm.
And I just didn't recognize that person. I started to not recognize the thought patterns that I was having. I'm like, who is this? Who is in my own head? Because I don't recognize him anymore. Like JT is not there.
Hmm.
Mm.
And I remember going to
Yeah.
it was Camp Homefront. So All Secure Foundation, which is Tom and Jen Satterley's organization, nonprofit. They host, they'll bring in different clinicians and doctors and resources and other benevolence to just talk to, 100 to 200 different operators throughout the community and their spouses. And so Kristen and I, we end up going to the first one that they hosted in Southern Pines, and it was eye opening because as I'm hearing these stories from other, some of the most elite guys, like Tom Satterley worked at Delta Force. He brought in other people that, worked at very high levels, had objectively successful careers, and they're struggling with the same stuff I'm struggling with.
Mhm.
And their stories are really similar to my story. And the same struggles that their spouse had to go through is the same that Kristen's going through. Um, and and I remember during that seminar, after hearing those stories and seeing other vets, other active duty guys get up on stage and be extremely vulnerable and share their stories and how it resonated with me and kind of woke me up. And then hearing how they got through it, what were their strategies, what were the things that they did.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's when my new addiction became like recovery, and how can I improve myself? So it started with the things I knew how to do, right? So I started there and I started getting an exercise routine. Then I started looking out like getting my blood work done and seeing, oh my God, my hormones are horrible. My cortisol level through the roof. My liver enzymes are high. I'm deficient in all these other basic vitamins, even with
Mm.
eating better. So then working with a functional medicine doctor to figure out like, hey, how can I like balance my hormones and get the testosterone levels back up? And that was a game changer because then all of a sudden energy came back. The dad bod that I was just like, yep, I'm just getting old and embracing the dad bod. All right, now I'm seeing that that doesn't have to be that way. And then going on an anti-inflammatory diet and bringing that down, like brought down a lot of the pain, the chronic pain that I was dealing with.
And how was your sleep at this point? Was your sleep getting better?
It was getting better. But it would take another 6 months to finally figure that one out. That was the most problematic for me. That was the last thing I actually figured out. Then, I started using All Secure Foundation's resources. They provided confidential coaching. And, I started seeing the providers on post, and found one that I could build a relationship with and kind of work through, different cognitive behavioral therapy modalities, yeah, EMDR. later ART, and those really helped a lot as I really dedicated myself to it. But then it was also like doing things that if you had asked me 5 years ago, or you told me 5 years ago, JT, I know you're not a morning person because I was that dude who would like wake up 15 minutes before formation and show up there, right?
Nice.
Um, you're going to be a morning person who wakes up, an hour and a half earlier than you have to. You're going to meditate every day. You're going to do cold plunges. You're going to do yoga, all before you start your day. You're going to journal. I would have been like, you're out of your freaking mind. Like, that's great. I'm glad people do that and they find something out of it. Not for me. And I got to that point when I hit that bottom and I was so desperate for change. And even everything I was doing wasn't working. Uh, that's when I was just like, I will try anything. Like if somebody said, "Hey, I'm trying, this journaling technique," I'll be like, "Cool, send it to me. Let me try it too."
Hmm.
Uh,
Mhm.
and so I would just absolutely everything, like cold plunges, got into those, and I still do them every day. First thing I do in the morning. Um, but there was a whole bunch of different practices to like cultivate mindfulness and kind of
Mhm.
different tools that I learned, breathing techniques, grounding techniques, that
Mhm.
at one point in time I would have just written off as like woohoo out there stuff. But I found they worked and they they helped, ground me. They helped me stay more centered. Um, and so the real big turning point though was it was January, yeah, it was January 31st. So that of last year. So that's when I stopped drinking. Um, and about 3 weeks prior to that day, I was desperate. I was looking at treatment facilities. At that point, I had told my command, I'm like, "Look, I'm struggling. Um, I have a plan. I'm gonna do these different treatments. If those don't work, then I'm gonna check myself into a treatment facility and I'm gonna pay for it out of pocket." Because like everything I'm doing up to that point wasn't working. Uh, or it was incremental, you know. Um, and so they were supportive, thankfully. I know that's not the case with a lot of other guys I talk to. Sometimes there's repercussions or stigma that's attached to it. Uh, but I laid out my plan, and my commander supported me doing that. And I said, I'll let you know if by this date I don't have it figured out. Then I'm going to activate this plan. Um, and so I was looking at paying for my own treatment because I couldn't get TRICARE to cover it. So I was about to pay, it was going to be $27,000 out of
Oof.
pocket because that's how desperate I was
Uh-huh.
uh, to go to Warriors Heart, which is a treatment facility down in Texas. They also have another place in Virginia. Phenomenal place. It's for active duty veterans and first responders. So you know, uh,
Okay.
paramedics, police, fire department. Great, phenomenal program that they got there. And as I looked into it, because I had sent some of my guys there, supported getting them there in the past, so I knew I'd heard, it was a great program. But I was gonna try Vivitrol before, doing that final thing, and I called the Special Operations Care Fund, kind of told them all the different things I was doing to try different treatments to try to get a handle on this, and saying, "Hey, my next step is I'm going to go to go to a treatment facility. I'm going to pay for." But I was wondering if they could cover the Vivitrol treatments because TRICARE also wasn't going to do that unless I self-referred to Sudsy, which I wasn't about to do um,
Mhm.
for a number of reasons.
What is Vivitrol? I'm not familiar with that. What is that?
Vivitrol is just the injectable form of naltrexone. It's just the brand name of it. But basically, if you consume alcohol on it, then you have a bad negative response, like feel sick.
Gotcha.
So a lot of guys I've talked to have had great success on it, where it's like, yeah, they just basically it's like Pavlov's dog, right? Like get a negative association with a behavior, and now all of a sudden you don't want to do the behavior anymore. So at that point, I was very much into like, how can I, brain hack my way to recovery and fight this addiction? So, things like exercise were great. Anytime I'd have a craving, I'd be like, all right, time to hit the gym,
Hmm.
Yeah.
but that only went so far. You can only work out so many hours a day before you just start destroying yourself. Um, so it's finding other practices and other things. And so that was just one I was looking at doing. But in that call, they had offered to send me to Warriors Heart, and they said they would cover it, which I was not expecting.
Oh,
Nice.
And
Good.
wow.
I was
That
blown away. They said, they call me back within an hour, like, "Hey brother, we got you. We'll send you whatever you want to go. You just let us know." And I was just like speechless because I was not expecting that. And then 2 days later, I had another organization, Operation Healing Forces, called me up and they're like, "Hey brother, like, heard you're going through a tough time. Would love to send you and the wife on this like all expenses paid trip to just get some time recharge." And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, that would be
heck
great.
yeah.
Yeah. Not saying no to
And
that.
then another organization, I had been trying to get a stellate ganglion block done, the SGB, because a lot of guys have had really good results with that for treating PTSD symptoms. Um, and so I had been trying to go through the referral process through the Army for the previous 3 months, and was finally got the referral, but it was going to take like another 2, 3 months to actually get it scheduled. And then this organization, the Operator Relief Fund, calls me up and it's like, "Hey, we'll get you on the schedule in 2 weeks."
There you go.
And so it just, in the
Wow.
span of 1 week, all these things kind of just came together in a way that I never would have expected. And so January 30th and 31st, they flew me and my wife down to Florida with Operator Relief Fund to go get the SGB. And then, I mean, like, I could talk for like 5 minutes on that experience alone. Um, but that, I immediately stopped drinking. It was like a light switch went off after I got the SGB.
Right.
It was like all the anxiety and all the noise in my brain, like, just got toned down. It was like getting a shot of Zen to the neck, where I just was like,
Nice.
holy crap. Like, I thought I knew
Good.
how to relax, but this was completely different. And you know just quickly, it's basically resetting your sympathetic nervous systems, because what they find a lot of times is guys that are exposed, guys and gals exposed to high stress situations or combat deployments, their sympathetic nervous system goes into the fight or flight, right? And so prolonged periods, it's like you stay at that heightened level, and you don't down regulate as easily.
You're you're constantly at fight.
Yeah, and that's very much where I was. It was just, I didn't even realize it. I just thought that that was the normal version of me. Um, and so it wasn't until I got the SGB that, I was like, "Oh, this is what normal feels like. I haven't felt normal in 20 years."
Wow.
That is great.
And then all of a sudden my cravings stopped. It was like, as soon as I was just had that little bit of relief, then I no longer craved it. And I woke up the next morning after getting it, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't, that no longer serves me anymore."
Beautiful.
But
Mhm.
I knew I wasn't in the clear, right? I'm like, I don't know how long this is gonna last, and that was my biggest fear. So then it was like, all right, what's the next thing? So I ended up going to Warriors Heart, 3 weeks sober, and then went into that program with 3 weeks of sobriety under my belt, um, which really set the conditions for me to just thrive, right? Because now we're doing the real work. Now we're getting our hands dirty, doing the CVT and really getting to the core issues. And one of the things that they do there is they call it the lifeline, right? So you basically go through your whole life story in great detail, but then you're also looking at, like, what are the core beliefs that you have about yourself,
Yeah.
and what are the values that were either imposed upon you early on, or that you just develop naturally over time. And then as you kind of go through all those key experiences, both good or bad, and you're identifying those key core emotions that are coming up, like, I'm not good enough, shame, guilt, you know or like moments where you felt proud of yourself, like, what was it that triggered that? And I had in therapy and other things, maybe I talked about specific incidents,
Mhm.
and looked at them, but you're looking at them from 6 inches away,
Yeah.
and you're reliving that experience in that moment.
Mhm.
But doing that exercise, which takes about 2.5 weeks into the programming to get to, because there's a lot of work that goes into it. Um, but mapping that out allowed me to kind of take a 30,000 foot perspective and really look at things through a different lens. Yeah, because now I'm not looking at it at 6 inches and just feeling the raw emotions in it. now I'm looking at everything holistically and kind of how it all ties together.
Mhm.
And it was,
Right.
things come up like while you're doing that lifeline, you're kind of working like stuff that happened on childhood or things that was like, man, that memory was gone until this moment. But then when you look at it all and you're like, well, no shit, you started drinking, almost committed suicide at 11 because of, all these issues in childhood. And then you see these patterns in a different way that you start to have a little bit more grace and compassion for
For
yourself.
yourself, yeah, for yourself.
And, for a
Absolutely.
long time, um, there's a lot of anger, resentment towards individuals, whether they're perpetrators or, people responsible for certain negative events that, that I would often harbor or hold on to those emotions. But then seeing that and understanding and almost disassociating from it allowed me to kind of move past that and like let that go, let that, anger and resentment go.
Now, did you feel a release? Like you were almost like chains were taken off at this moment?
Oh, yeah.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
no, there is I remember, because the other thing with the lifeline, it's kinda like step 5 in AA program, right? Like, you have to basically, like, tell your story and some of the stuff that you've maybe never told another individual in your entire life. And, so you have to basically go through your lifeline in a group setting. Um, and there were certain items that I'm like, I'm taking that one to my grave. I'm never telling another soul. And so even on my little lifeline where you like write it out, it'd be like XXX and then maybe the date, and that was it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I didn't know who was going to be there in my group setting. So I'm like, yeah, I might not cover that one. We'll see. We'll see. But going in there and, there was another Marine actually. He was a senior NCO Marine. Um, that had a similar moment to at Camp Homefront, where other guys that are respecting the community get up there, have those moments of vulnerability. And this Marine, I had never seen anybody be so honest about stuff that like would have been so uncomfortable sharing.
Mm.
But then the most amazing thing happened is that instead of being judged or criticized, that Marine was just embraced as like with support, with compassion, with love. And it was one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen because he connected to everybody else in that room and they didn't judge him at all. They just wanted to be there, support them because they saw themselves in his own
In him.
story.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I told this guy that later. I was like, man, that inspired me to like go into that room, and when I saw the group of people that were there, I thought of him and what he did, and then I was like, now it's my time. Now it's my time to just get it all out there.
That's the power of groups. That's the power of group therapy.
Yeah, especially the right group when you're around a bunch of other fellow warriors that you can connect
Yeah.
to and relate to,
Mhm.
and I know some people that struggle with like finding that right AA group because you can have wildly different stories and experiences in some of those meetings. And sometimes it can be hard to not,
Right.
to really connect with people and what they're experiencing.
Mhm.
To your earlier question, Joe, is like, yeah, there was that release. Like
Good.
there
Yeah.
was like an emotional depression after getting it all out there, almost like, all right, I'm shocked.
Uh-huh.
But then I remember having this like epiphany moment, in another group session where it was just another AA meeting or whatever at Warriors Heart. And it was, I think, four days after I had done the lifeline. And I'm sitting there, I'm kind of writing in my journal as I'm like half listening to, what they're reading. And and I realized like, I need to really forgive everybody that maybe wronged me or did anything. And so I reached, after kind of thinking it through, I really had this like almost spiritual moment where it's like, okay, I can really forgive everyone that ever did anything wrong, like truly forgive, and which would baffle me because, when I'd see, the old lady on TV on the stand in court forgiving, the killer of her son on the stand and being like, I don't, it never computed to me. I'm like, what, how,
Yeah.
why? Like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Like,
Right.
no. But I reached that place unexpectedly. Um, and then about 30 seconds later, it finally dawned on me. I'm like, okay, you've forgiven everybody, but you haven't forgiven yourself.
That's the biggest one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that was really like the changing moment, where it was like the separation from the old me to the new me, and and accepting that, like, all right, yeah, maybe I've done some things that I'm not proud of, or maybe I wasn't the leader, the man, the husband, the father, the friend, the brother that I wanted to be. But that's okay. Like, I did the best that I could, and I no longer have to be that person. I can evolve into a better version of myself in the process.
And in a way, I mean, if you shift perspective, you kind of had to go through all that to be the man that you are today, and even though it sucks going through that, it makes you look at things differently. So you could either appreciate or approach things differently, but it's only through your experience. Because again, if you didn't go through that, you probably wouldn't even be on this podcast right now telling your story. You had to go through every step in order to be here. So kudos to you, man. That's awesome. Are you or do you know a veteran who is struggling with substance abuse that could use some motivation? Have them tune in. Look, they won't change until they're ready to, but if we could cause a crack in the dam, it doesn't hurt to listen. If you are a sober veteran that would like to share your story in hopes to inspire others, please contact us at thissobervet.com. Show notes and more info could be found at thissobervet.com, and be sure to check us out on social media. We'd love to connect with you. So one thing I want to say, and it's a saying you said earlier that I think is awesome. I'm going to start saying it too. My new addiction became recovery. That is huge, because most addicts just have that addictive personality. And before, when you were using it to either drink or do drugs or whatever your addiction of choice is, now, because I'm the same way too. When I became sober, I got really bored, because now you have all this time where before you were drinking. And so I'm like, what can I do now? So that's when I started like finding all these things. And now pretty much every decision I make now, I look at it and I go, does this serve me or not? Because if it doesn't serve me, it's not my new addiction of recovery. So I just kind of put it over there and let people do their thing. And yeah, that is a great addiction to have, is recovery, because it's ongoing. And I'm sure you're dealing with that now. So how long have you been sober?
I think it's right around 430 days. I'd have to do the math or look at my app.
Okay.
Okay.
Congratulations. Now, did you notice anything for me when I hit the year mark? For some reason, when I first quit drinking, like, I don't know why, but I lost like all my self-confidence, and I kind of had to slowly win that back by doing these little wins of realizing I could get through tough situations without drinking, or I could just deal with a hard day without drinking. And all these little wins kind of got me to where I'm confident now. Did you have any issues with that, or how was your confidence affected by sobriety?
In early sobriety, I think I was a lot more fearful, and I was hearing the stories of other guys in recovery where they're relapsing, um, and I remember one of the things that I asked one of the guys who had just hit a year. I was like, "How'd you do it, man?" Like, at the time I was still struggling, um, and he's like, I realized that I just needed a mental shift. I needed to change my mental approach to it. And for him, that was 90 and 90. For me, 90 and 90 with three kids and a full-time working wife who works 7 days a week, like, that's just not feasible. Um, but the key takeaway was like, all right, I need to find that mental shift. And for me, it came about through doing all those different treatments and different practices. And then eventually it got that mental shift. And once I had that shift, it was like I'd still have the cravings, right? Like, even in early sobriety, and I was fearful initially those first like 3-4 months, because I'm like, I'm one bad day or one bad trigger situation away from losing it all. So it's
Right.
like, even though I felt the shift and I felt that things were different this time, and I knew I didn't want to go back to the old version of me anymore. It was every day, what are the things I can do to maximize my chances of long-term recovery? And so even leaving, Warriors Heart, it wasn't like, all right, we're good, we learned everything we need. It's like, no, man, like, that's where it just started,
Yeah. Right.
and now it's every day, like, it's all right, how can I add to it? How can I tweak this practice? How can I, do this? How can I get more involved in other things that are going to help out the community? That, and by doing that, just like how you started this podcast, like, by being a medium to talk about these things and normalize them. It also incentivizes you to keep living that life.
100%. Yeah,
Because like if
absolutely.
Joe suddenly starts getting on his podcast and he's like 5 sheets to the wind, it's
Yeah,
like,
slur my words and yeah,
yeah,
that's
you're
not good.
probably not going to
Right.
last very long.
No, not
Right.
at all.
you know but if you're living it, not just for yourself but for others, right? So like goes back to earlier when I was like, I never had a problem getting sober for other people. It was just I had a problem getting sober for me. But when the new me then is intertwined with other people, then you find that purpose of, okay, now I'm not just getting sober for me, I'm getting sober for everyone else, to have those continued impacts in the way that I want to be. So I'm living in alignment with, to be that better version of myself.
JT, your journey is amazing. But
Yes.
one thing I have to ask, we haven't touched on this yet. Can you explain what the mindful warrior is?
So, I mean, that really came out of after I came back from Warrior's Heart. I already kind of started creating my own database of like different benevolent organizations and resources out there, and practices and stuff, for myself, just as a way of kind of tracking, like, all right, what are the different things I could do, or what can I try next if this doesn't work. Um, but then after Warrior's Heart, I would have people reach out, and they'd ask like what resources are there, or what I did to, recover or find sobriety. And so I'd start sharing these things just kind of as people ask me about them. We'd be like, oh yeah, let me send you this Excel document. And then I started talking to clinicians and different providers on posts and trying to figure out the referrals, to understand, why did I hit this roadblock when I was trying to get this treatment, and how can we get to yes, or tying in with the Care Coalition and figuring out, all right, what are the different treatment programs that you guys can support through your network. And so as I got more involved in understanding the different benevolence that are out there, I just saw a gap. And I saw that gap of like being able to connect people depending on what their situation was, whether it was the service member or their spouse or their family, to the resources that they needed to kind of get through it, whether it was TBI, PTSD, insomnia, substance uses.
Nice.
And I had enough people start to reach out, that I was sharing this database with them. I was like, well, why don't I just share this, in a public forum? And I tried to initially like go to the Army and talk to the lawyers and be like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hang it on a website and, put it all out there. And they're like, no, you can't do that. You're active duty. And now you're showing preferential thing. And they're going to blah, blah,
That's
blah.
tough.
And
Yeah.
so I'm like, got it. I'm still going to do it anyway. I'll just create an LLC. I'll hang it there. We're structured as a not for loss. Because we had, thought about maybe structuring as a not for profit, but like really the whole purpose of the Mindful Warrior is like, I'm not trying to create another nonprofit, right? Like there are so many nonprofits out there that do great work. Um, I'm trying to connect people to those nonprofits. And then I'm also like on the website, we almost have it ready for launch. So you can query the database where it has all the different resources for families out there, that they can get access to some of these treatments and programs that I benefited from, or other ones I've learned along the way. Um, so they can access that, but they can also access, you know, different, books, different research studies to better understand the impacts of alcohol on sleep, anxiety, or other issues. So it's, both, have a database for research so people can just self-educate, or get access to content like shows like yours, Joe, and Dr. T, where they can hear from other people in their community, and they're not just randomly searching on the web. So we really try to filter out all the noise and take those, hey, here's 40,000 nonprofits. Well, here's like 200 that do really good work. And we've kind of vetted them, within our community. And so it's specifically geared right now towards special operations community, and supporting, soldiers and families. Eventually we might expand that, but that's kind of what we're focused on. So it's really just connecting people with the resources and information to help the community out.
That's huge. That's huge. And you know what I love What I love about the soldier mentality is that no matter if you're just the redheaded stepchild of the Army, aka the Air Defense Artillery, like Dr. T and I were, or if you're a Special Forces Green Beret operator up here, when we see a gap, we take action. Like,
Yeah.
because that's what I
Yes.
did with this podcast is
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone talk about normalizing sobriety with veterans, So
Yeah.
that's why I'm like, well, shit, if no
Mhm.
one's done it, then I might as well do it.
Yeah.
Here I am,
Absolutely.
send me, And the fact that you're doing the same thing, man, is just, it's so motivating. So can you please share that with me? Like
Yeah.
when the website's up, I would love to share that on my
Absolutely.
socials and get the word out because that is definitely much needed.
Yeah. And I mean, the secondary, um, goal of that is also immediate needs because at one point I had people reaching out that needed to get to treatment immediately, and so
Mhm.
normally I'd
Mhm.
try to hook them up with a benevolent that I know would help pay for their flight to get to treatment and all that. But in some cases, like we couldn't get it quick enough. So I was paying out of pocket to buy these guys tickets and stuff. So I'm like, well, what if we just structure it all under an LLC? And then, if there's some creative way we can get donations or, fund it or, sell some swag, then whatever money comes in, we'll just throw it all back into those initiatives and those efforts or just continue to like build, the platform to help people out. So that's why
Okay.
it's structured is like I don't take a dime for it, and that's why I told the lawyers like I'm still going to do it because it's like it's a benevolent intention, and
Yes.
like I'll show you the statements. Like I'm not going to make a dime off of it. Everything's going back to the community and helping people out. So yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think I'd love to hang some of your content on the site when we do get it up because I think having this discussion or these discussions is critical to it
Hmm.
because the reality is there is a stigma
Right.
and there's a lot of people that don't understand it, and like I don't blame them. It's just they either haven't experienced it themselves or don't fully understand it, and a lot of leaders I talk to on active duty, they view substances as a self-discipline problem where it's like yeah, it's like, if a dude breaks his leg on a deployment because he fell off a helicopter or got shot or whatever the case may be, like you're not gonna ding him for that, you know.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a protocol that says, hey, here's what you do to get better. And everybody kind of understands that, accepts that. But when it comes to something like addiction, there's not that same level of understanding and acceptance.
Yeah.
And they're like,
Absolutely.
well, why can't you run? You just broke your leg. Just keep running. Like, just run harder, run through the pain. Like, no, that's not how it works.
And it's crazy because I've had that conversation with myself because when I was deep in my addiction, like when I would drink, dude, I would feel so good in such a different way because that buzz would kill all the noise, let me enjoy. I would usually listen to music or do something active while I'm drinking, and I would just
Yeah.
focus on that, and everything else would magically go away. And when I would wake up the next day with a fierce hangover, I'm like, dude, like you're pretty intelligent. Like, why are you doing this? Like, it
Right.
makes no sense. But then, like you said, the next day, here I am in my basement sneaking Southern Comfort again because I wanted to catch that buzz again. Because I'm like, I'll
Yeah.
deal with that. That's Tomorrow Joe's problem, and that's a horrible way to live. So I agree, Dr. T. It is a disease because
Yeah.
once you get turned on to it, you're just like, oh, I need more. You're like my precious. Like, yeah, I was bad with alcohol, and for that reason, I actually never tried any drugs. I've smoked weed a couple times in my life, but for that reason, because of what alcohol did to me, anytime anybody offered me anything else, I was like, dude, if I'm this way with alcohol, I don't want to jump on that and have to fight that battle too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's nuts. Well, JT, I'm so happy to have you on this show. Thank you so much for being vulnerable, sharing your story. And yeah, because man, I could relate a lot to what you did with the hiding, with the trying and trying and trying, and then getting an ultimatum, and then seeking outside help that finally worked. Like, I definitely relate to your story, and I know a lot of our listeners will too. Definitely. So, if there's one thing you could kind of just sum up in the end for people that are operating at your level, that are dealing with the addiction, don't know a way out, maybe don't have a good support system, if there's just some carrot that you could dangle for them to let them know that it will be okay, what would that message be?
Just knowing that you're not alone. At least for myself, I had convinced myself that like this was my own problem and that it was unique and that I just needed to sort it out. But the moment that I realized that there's a whole community of people out there in recovery, and there's a lot of people that have gone through very similar things, I realize that, like, you don't need to suffer in silence. You reach out, call a buddy, like, talk about these things. Call me. Like, I tell guys all the time when I do other speaking events and stuff, I'm like, call me. Like, I'll talk to you about it, and then we can talk about the ways forward. Um, but I think, some people, they're worried about, it getting to their command, or, it impacting their careers. And there's a lot of misinformation out there, that is convincing guys that they can't get treatment, or they have to wait to get treatment, because it's going to impact their family or their lives or their reputation. But there's a lot of ways to get help with confidentiality. So I encourage guys to reach out, whether it's to me, whether it's, to other organizations like All Secure Foundation. Like, those are great starting points. But there's a number of other organizations that, on that website. Once I get it up, we'll make sure to kind of attach it to the show notes, and other guys, because I do think it benefits not only just the soft community. There are some resources in there for other Army active duty and veterans as well, or at least provides a framework or a methodology of, like, how you can tackle some of these issues. My name is JT Morocco, and that's how I became the Sober Vet.